And we are having the renowned speaker, Dr. G Murthy, who is National Coordinator of the IKS Division, AICTE, and Professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. We are having the chairperson, Dr. Ajay Namdev, who is Associate Professor and HOD Pharmacognosy at Pune College of Pharmacy, Bharati Vidyapeeth, Pune. Dr. Namdev is working as a HOD in Department of Pharmacognosy in Pune College of Pharmacy, Pune. He did his PhD on bioreactor management from Devi Ahilya University, Indore. And he has experience of industrial research in collaboration with Bhabha Atomic Research Center, Mumbai, where he was instrumental in bioreactor technology transfer. He has done MBA Marketing and MSc in Total Quality Management. He completed the DBT Overseas Postdoctorate Associateship in the year 2007-8 under Professor R. Verpoorte from Leiden University, Netherlands, and worked on plant. Just I am muting. He has completed the DBT Overseas Postdoctoral Associateship in 2007-8 under Professor Dr. R. Verpoorte in Leiden University, Netherlands, and worked on plant metabolics. Dr. Namdev has completed 6 government-funded research projects worth rupees 70 lakhs from the DBT, AICTE, UGC, and BRNS. 3 doctorate and 33 postgraduate projects are completed under his guidance. He published 60 research papers in international and national journals and presented 80 research papers in international and national conferences and delivered more than 85 guest lectures. He is life member of many professional societies. He has about 1700 citations, H index of 19, and I-10 index of 26. He has authored a reference book on medicinal plant biotechnology with Career Publication, Nasik, and written 6 book chapters and contributed in the monograph in American Herbal Pharmacopoeia. He has visited the Netherlands, Germany, France, Italy, Rome, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, and other countries for various academic and professional activities. Now I request Dr. Ajay Namdev to proceed further.
Good morning, sir. Thank you, Hemant sir, for introducing me. It is a great privilege to me to introduce Dr. G Murthy sir. But before introducing him, actually the knowledge system or Indian knowledge system in context of NEP 2020 is the topic on which Dr. G Murthy sir is going to talk. But before going to start his introduction, I am interested to wish everyone a very happy new year and a Naya Varshi Shubhechha. And again, very happy new year. And again, very happy new year. Why? Why this happy new year? Because we are having our Panchang or our calendar, what we call as Panchang, and in that all the details are there, maybe of solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, or various positions of stars, and on the basis of those stars we celebrate every year, say Makar Sankranti, what we have recently celebrated, or all the festivals. So our ancient knowledge or the traditional knowledge is very, very vast and enriched. But because of some lack of our interest in the ancient information or knowledge system, We are just following the English calendar and other things. So Dr. Ganti Murthy, who is the coordinator of this national coordinator for IKS Division, he is the best person. And Murthy sir,
Yes.
Sir, recently we met in IKS Rishihood University.
Yes.
You recall? So,
I do recall.
Lecture there, and it was a very nice introduction to that. So, to all the audience, Dr. Ganti Murthy sir, he is a professor in biosciences and biomedical engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, Indore. He is his national coordinator of Indian Knowledge Systems for Ministry of Education, operating from AICTE. He is also the founding head of the Center for Indian Scientific Knowledge Systems at IIT Indore. Previously, he was tenured professor in biological and ecological engineering department at Oregon State University for 14 years. He is the co-founder and CEO of GRW Engineering LLC and currently serves as its chairman and board of directors. He has PhD in agriculture and biological engineering from Ministry of Illinois in Urbana campaign. He has MTech and BTech agriculture engineering from IIT Kharagpur and NEP respectively. Dr. Murthy's group broadly focuses on developing sustainable solutions for a resource-constrained world. Sustainable solutions for technically feasible, economically viable, resource sustainable, environmentally conscious, and socially acceptable. These are the terms which we heard, but we don't know the exact meaning. So Dr. Murthy is going to explain these terms with practical applications. Dr. Murthy's research is specifically focused on sustainable bioprocessing and engineered systems analysis. His group employs a combination of experimental and theoretical approaches to conduct multi-scale and systems level analysis. They study the nutrient energy water nexus with a particular focus on building the resilience of ecological systems to pulse and pressure disturbances. So with this brief introduction, on behalf of Pune College of Pharmacy, Bharati Vidyapith deemed to be university, I welcome Dr. Ganti Murthy sir to deliver his talk. Yes, welcome sir.
Thank you so much, Ajay, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, and great to see you again. And namaste to everyone. So I think we'll get into this thing talk, and then we'll go from there. So, are you all able to see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. So, as Ajay was saying, Happy New Year. So you'll see that I have used the Indian calendar. Today is Shukravasara, Pushyamasa Krishna Paksha Tritiya Tithi, Plava Samatsara, 1943 Shalivahana Shaka. The reason I mention that is because this calendar, if you analyze it, is one of the most scientific calendars available in the world today, not in the past, today. So we would start off with that. And then I would basically talk about the Indian knowledge systems, especially in the context of the National Education Policy 2020. Why is that required? Why was that basically important in today's context? So let us go forward. Very nice slides. Okay. So why did we need to revisit our NEP? We already had a national education policy. It was 32 years old, 36 years old, but still we have one. Why did we need to revisit it? If you look at why we needed to do that, it's essentially because it lays out, the NEP actually lays it out, because things have changed. Last education policy was something around 36 years ago, and 86 or 87. And at that time, remember 36 years ago, we did not have, the economy was not liberalized. We were still in the socialist mode of economy, and then life was very different. It was a time when you had to wait for months for getting an STD connection in home, And we did not have internet. We did not have any computers as widespread as they are today. There were only probably few computers here and there in some of the research institutions around the country. And at that time, we were just getting, the IT revolution was just getting started somewhere. And Infosys was 4 or 5 year old company. And so, I mean, these are all like, it was a very different world at that time. And now we live in this 21st century where things are extremely different. There was no Google, there was no Yahoo, there was no Facebook, there was none of these social media, Twitter, none of these things existed. And in fact, internet did not exist. So it was a very different world. Now, when we are talking about this world, and we need to really develop our education system to be to meet the needs of this world. And for that, we have to aim that we need to have in India an education system that should be the topmost in the world, because nothing except the best will work for us. We have to aim for that. And as our president, honorable president, Dr. Abdul Kalam ji had said, we have to become the best. Only strength respects strength. And for that, we need to have the education system by 2040, that is second to none. That is a goal that the NEP, the National Education Policy of 2020, sets it. Because unfortunately, when you look at many of the quality rankings for where our education system stands today, it has actually gone down, and we are not even in the top 100. And it is not a good thing for a country like India, which was known for the highest quality of education in the world. And people used to come from all over the world, Nalanda, Takshashila, all the places like this, Vikramshila, for learning from all over the world. And from there to what we are today, I mean, we need to really tighten our belts and make sure that our education system in our country is the best in the world. And we also must make sure that this education system is equitable in access and provides highest quality education for all learners, regardless of social or economic background. This is the goal that the NEP has set it. Because of these kind of things, we needed a new revision of the education policy. And the National Education Policy, essentially 2020, says that it aims to address the many growing developmental imperatives of our country. And what is it proposing? It says that we need to create a new system that is aligned with the aspirational goals of 21st century education, while building upon India's traditions and value systems. That is where the connection between the National Education Policy of 2020 and the India's traditions and value systems, Indian knowledge systems, comes into play. So the National Education Policy of 2020 is tightly basically integrated with the Indian knowledge systems. And it is a future-looking policy with very well-grounded roots in the past. So which is essentially derives its strength from our traditions and looks to the future to touch the sky, essentially. That is a kind of education policy that we have. And what does this education policy show them? What does this education policy, sorry about that technical this. So, what is the basically the new education policy talk about? If you look at the total education, especially let us focus on the school education first, and then we'll get into the higher education. So what does it say? Now what we are familiar with is this kind of a setup. Essentially, we have a preschool kind of a thing, and then from age 6 to 16 is the 10 years of classic education, and then we have 11th and 12th, or basically the secondary school, class 12. And so essentially the whole thing is divided between two modules kind of thing. And there is a 10-year block from class 1 to class 10, and then before that is not really well defined. And then there is another block of 2 years from ages 16 to 18. What the new education policy says is that we need to divide this into four basically curricular structure. 4 levels of the curricular structure. Why is that? How did they come up with these 4 curricular structures? They have looked into a lot of research that has gone into how children learn, how basically how the young mind develops. Based on that, they have said that It is not really the first to 10, 1 to 10 and 12 to 11 and 12. That is not probably a good idea. Better to do something different, in which where we are talking about going to what we are calling as a foundational structure, curricular structure, where children up to ages 6, 3 to 6, 3 to 8, they have about 5 years of education, which is essentially the foundational aspects of their entire education. So they are learning about basic things, exploring their world. And then there comes the preparatory module, which is essentially classes 3 to 5, where they are taught about the basic literacy, how to read, how to count, and write their names, read books, those kind of things. And then when you come to the middle school, which is class 6 to 8, that's when they start introducing higher level concepts and then getting deeper into the subjects. And then in the secondary, which is essentially the topmost structure, starts at 9th class and then goes to 12th class for 4 years, is essentially where they go into more deeper studies. And then it talks about making the entire whole structure learner-centric. And therefore, there is a big emphasis on what they are calling as a foundational literacy, especially in the first few years of a child's life. And then they want to make this thing, the whole school education, holistic learning, integrated, well integrated with what goes on in the classroom and goes, what they learn at home and outside the classroom, in the playground. All of that should be integrated and holistic. It should be considered as one module. And it should be enjoyable for the child, and it should be engaging for the child. And a lot of these things, if you will, sometimes it sounds like we are just talking about something that was already there. If you look at how Bhaskaracharya, for example, approached Leelavati to teach math, it is exactly this kind of methods that he uses in there, where he talks about daily life examples. He talks he addresses a child and then says, "Oh, child, tell me what is this. Oh, Leelavati, tell me what is this. Oh, Vatsa, tell me what is this." And he talks about there are so many bees on a flower, and then how many will be there, and he formulates problems in terms of that. And daily life examples in terms of, if I have a measure of a cloth, how do I cut into different pieces? Or if I have some money that I'm paying in as a tax in different places, how much money will I be left? I mean, it's a very engaging, relatable, integrated type of learning that, again, the new education policy, national education policy, is focusing on. And it is focusing especially on reducing dropout rates, especially when you look at the dropout rates after class 6, it's pretty high in many states. And so very, validly, the NEP focuses on trying to reduce those dropout rates, and also talks about learning for all. Right now, unfortunately, the system has become, especially with the advent of very high-priced private education, many of the poor and lower middle-class people find it difficult to make sure that they give the best education for the child. Although all parents try to do that, it is important that as a society, we need to ensure that anybody who wants to study, who is qualified, should be able to study. And that is what this learning for all really is trying to say. And then in terms of that, it is also focusing on efficient resourcing, because what happened in the previous education policies and RTE as well was that it was focusing on the inputs for a school education. For example, it was saying you need to have a playground, you need to have so many teachers, you need to have so many desks, chairs, computers, this, and all those things. But really not focused on what is the child learning on the output side of things. So this NEP really focuses on the outputs. Says, how do you manage it? Make sure that the child learns these things. That is more important than having so many desks, so many chairs, so many books and all that, because there could be creative use and efficient use of these resources across multiple schools or things like that, so that ultimately the point is that the child should learn. And for that, there should be no compromise on the standards. That is what, again, the NEP emphasizes. How do we make sure that the learning that we are talking about, that is integrated, holistic, is enjoyable for the child, is engaging for the child, focused on reducing the dropout rates, equitable access to anybody who wants to learn should be able to learn by optimizing the efficient resource use, focusing on how children learn. All of that really depends on maintaining high standards. And if you have to do all of these high standards, deliver high standard education for all this, who is going to do this except teachers? teachers are the key to do this. So the success of the NEP 2020 really depends on teachers ultimately, because you can provide whatever resources you want, but if teachers are not interested, this is not going to work. But if teachers are interested, even with limited resources, they can make it work. So that is what the whole focus is on. And then when you come to higher education, the biggest emphasis is on quality. Because remember, I mean, you must be reading a lot of newspapers where they say the number of engineering graduates who graduate, there are very few of them are actually ready for the industry. And what does that really say about our engineering education or higher education in general? Same thing with the doctors, same thing with any discipline that you take. There is a big problem of quality in our education system, and we need to really make sure that the quality of our education system improves, especially in the higher education. And what is required for that, again, is this holistic multidisciplinary education. And for that, delivering a holistic and multidisciplinary education, because again, you look at it, this making it engaging for the child and something that enriches the experience of the child in the school education. But the same thing applies even in the higher education as well. So how do you make it more engaging for the child? You need to make it multidisciplinary, more holistic, so that this student who comes to the undergrad college actually learns things and that he or she can apply in their life, and then it actually gives some career skills that actually can help them in their career. And one of the things that is required for that is consolidation and restructuring. Because right now, a lot of the colleges, universities, they're very fragmented. So you have an engineering college where there is no one who will teach them something a little bit about the medicine, or they will teach something about the arts or history. So a child who goes to an engineering college, for example, will only be restricted to learning only engineering, not any other topics that he or she may be interested in. So a lot of advances in this century are going to be at the interface of different disciplines, and in fact transcending the discipline. So essentially it will be the transdisciplinary innovations that will essentially happen. And that can only happen if we teach our children properly in give them a multidisciplinary education with a holistic perspective, so that the multidisciplinary can become interdisciplinary and it can become transdisciplinary education for them. And for that, the consolidation and restructuring of the way that we are envisioning education institutions is an important thing. And for that, what they mean by the consolidation restructuring is there should be a minimum of 3,000 students in a university or a college. The idea is, and there should be multiple disciplines, so that these 3,000 students coming from different backgrounds, different disciplines interact with each other. And there is that integrated, basically a reaction that is taking place. It's like a very active youth energy that they all interact, and then there's all this burst of innovation that will take place because of these interactions. And that is what they really want to focus on. And for that, they want to optimize the learning environment. What do they mean by optimal learning environment? It's essentially a learning environment that is focused on learning, not too much on the marks. Unfortunately, even at the higher education level, we are focused on marks, all these kind of things, rather than the learning. So if you give a goal, the system will go and achieve that. It will be optimized to achieve that. So if you say that you have to, I will measure the amount of learning by these number of marks that you have achieved, the education system will orient itself in such a way that it will train students to achieve the maximum marks. But if we change the goal and then say the goal for the education system is to learn better, then the education system will automatically go to that direction and then make sure that students learn. So this is something that we need to really rethink and see how we can make sure that the learning environment is optimal. And then again, for that, you need energized faculty. Energized faculty means that we need to have faculty who are motivated to teach, who actually have, the faculty will be motivated to teach only if their basic needs are taken care of, whether you talk about financially or other resources in terms of where they sit, how their offices look, or do they have a clean environment, do they have really good facilities to actually do the research, to go online, do things, do they have access to good computing facilities, do they have good laboratory facilities, are they motivated, are there incentives for meritorious faculty? These are all the things that will energize the faculty. And are there enough, are the financial packages enough for the faculty so that they can actually meet their personal needs and all that? These are all part of what NEP calls as energies faculty. And then they also, NEP also talks about the importance of vocational education, because we realize that not all students will go to their, who are studying in the undergraduate education will go to masters and PhD. There is only fraction of the students will go there. So it is important for us to make sure that the students who are studying in undergraduate education, they will also vocationally trained, so that will help them in their careers as well. And so there is a very, very important thing, and NEP places a huge amounts of emphasis on this thing. And it also talks about how recognizing existing learning. So there is, how do you recognize learning that is already there, present? In the, like, for example, let's say you take an artisan or some kind of an artist, they don't really, they may or may not have a professional degree, but they're really experts. So how do you bring them in? That is part of, again, rethinking that we need to do in the vocational education. And for this, there is it has been noticed that there is a big synergy between research and teaching. And how do we bring that into all colleges? Right now, there is a lot of research and teaching that happens in some of the IITs and NITs and some institutions like that. But we need to bring this to every institution of India, every college of India, every school of India. How do we bring it? That is something that, again, we need to implement, and NEP talks about that. And as it was for the school education, teachers are the key here. Unless you have energized faculty, you have teachers who are of good quality, who are energized, motivated to teach, none of these things are going to work. And to help them, we need to really transform the regulatory system in such a way that it is not paperwork heavy. It should be light but tight. That's what the words that the NEP uses. It should be light in the sense, but it should be waterproof in terms of regulating the quality. And this is where the leadership of the institutions and in the higher education sector, and then the governance part of it, really come into picture. So these are all the 10 aspects that the NEP talks about when it talks about the higher education listing in the country. And then it also talks about other key areas of focus. For example, it talks about professional education. I was talking about the vocational education. So how do you bring in that professional artists, artisans who may not necessarily have a degree, but they are experts in their area? So how do we bring that into formal education, or how do we recognize existing learning? And then how do we really upskill or upskill our, or even reskill our adult population, so that there is a focus on the adult education as well. And NEP puts a big focus on promotion of Indian languages, arts and culture. In the last 2 to 3 decades, it has been shown in research after research that teaching children in their matrabhasha, in their mother tongue, really improves few things: how they can connect, the innovation, the understanding of the concepts, and actually implementing them later. That innovativeness is really, really improved when you teach a child in his or her own matrabhasha, their mother tongue. And therefore, NEP says the whole emphasis of NEP on Indian languages is because of this. It talks about how we need to really promote all the Indian languages in our educational curriculum. And Indian education was always a well-rounded education. If you look at it, we called basically even engineering and science disciplines as kalas, arts, in our 64 kalas and all. And there are many more kalas. That is one classification. There are, again, other classification that talks about 120 odd kalas and many things like that. So Shodasha kalas, Chaturshashti kalas, and many things like that. So we are a society that recognizes all kinds of different arts. How do we promote that? Because if you think about it, there were memoirs written by Portuguese visitors to, for example, to Sri Krishnadevaraya's Karnataka Vijayanagara Empire, where he talks about how many different types of perfumes were made in India at that time. At least just in the Vijayanagara Empire, not even in the other parts, just in the Vijayanagara. And we know Kannauj and those places like that in UP were famous for their perfumes. How many of us really teach art of Indian perfumes today in formal education? Not many. And then there are these traditional techniques that are there of art of making these perfumes that is getting lost. How do we really promote all that? Now, I mean, if you talk about perfumes, people say, oh, okay, French perfumes. But do we know we were really known for these types of perfumes? And in the world at that time, we used to export perfumes. What happened to all that art? Is that not something that we can enjoy? Everybody can enjoy even today. And so we need to protect that art. Similarly, all the culture that we have. I mean, we have, and we need to promote, protect, preserve, promote, and basically make it more widespread. And for that, there is a huge focus of that in the NEP as well. And then using technology for the optimal. This, whenever we talk about Indian languages, promoting art and culture, it doesn't mean that we have to go back to some 10th century or 5th century or 15th century. No, what we are talking about is we have to remain in this world and then use the technology, for example, take it forward. So for that, we have to use whatever technology we have and take it to the, it has to be forward looking. And that is where NEP also talks about using technologies appropriately for delivering the school education, high school education, and also basically integrating, making sure that the information is available and the skills are available for anybody to learn whenever they need. Again, that transitions to the point number 5, which is talking about the online and digital education. So these are all the other areas that NEP 2020 focuses. NEP 2020 was released in 2020, but remember that there was a 5 to 6 year exercise that preceded it. So the emphasis on online and digital education is very heartening to see, because these things happened in the NEP even before the COVID actually happened, right? COVID happened in 2020 and end of 2020, essentially, end of 2019, 2020. And you see, I mean, still the NEP by that time had already thought about these things, that importance of online and digital education. So it's a very good policy that way to think about these kind of very forward-looking policies for meeting the needs of India. Right? And how do you really make it happen? All of these things that we talked about really will happen only if there are a few things. For example, we have to make sure that the Central Advisory Board of Education is really strengthened to make sure that the guidelines are formulated properly. Financing aspects need to be taken care of. As we say, Dhanamulam idam jagat, so nothing will work if we don't finance it. All these things will remain mere words if we don't back it up with the financial muscle, the executionary muscle, and then the implementation aspects of it. So if you are not, or the society doesn't become ekonmukha for this, it won't really happen. So therefore, it is important to make sure that these financing aspects are also taken care of. And finally, the implementation part requires a lot of stakeholders to work together to make sure that this thing happens. So these are some of the things that the NEP focuses on in their this thing. And especially in the higher education, I would just focus a little bit on that before I come into the other things. So it talks about, because I'm talking to an audience that is primarily consisting of higher education folks. So I'll talk a little bit about that. It talks about this consolidation and restructuring. What is that? Again, I mentioned that earlier, that we need to really think about how we can bring at least a minimum number of cohort. Let's say it talks about 3,000 students, so that there is that churning of ideas. If you don't have that kind of a mass, then there is not a lot of churning that will happen. It is, and that mantha needs to happen for good, holistic, integrated education, which will be innovative and will result in innovative ideas and things like that. So there is a need for consolidation of some existing institutes and restructuring, so that it becomes holistic, the education becomes holistic and also multidisciplinary. In the same institute, you should be able to go and take a course in history, and then you should be able to go take a course in archaeology, at the same time study for your undergraduate in biology. You know, right now there are all these disciplines where they're using the modern genomic, basically your genome sequencing technologies for studying the soil. They're extracting DNA from the soil, from the archaeological sites, so that they can figure out what kind of people were there. I mean, what was the genetic relationship between the people? So this was used in, for example, in Rakigadi samples, and extracting DNA and all those things from bones is an old one. Now they are even trying to extract it from soils. They are trying to extract lipids so that you can identify what kind of food they used to eat. Or, I mean, there are so many things. So it really requires somebody who knows archaeology, somebody who knows biology. So just to give you one example of that, you can learn so many things, and it has to be multidisciplinary education. And this is again something that we have traditionally recognized in India. Said Chaturshashti Kalas, for example, and then they had a wide variety of different basically kalas. And for that, it is again important to have an optimal learning environment. When you have consolidation, restructuring, and you're talking about multidisciplinary education that is holistic, it is very, very important to ensure that we don't simply add on courses to students and then ask them to take the courses, but we have to really rethink about how to make the learning environment optimal. And again, the faculty is really important for that. And vocational education, I briefly pointed out earlier, and then the synergy between the research and teaching. As somebody who's worked at R1 University in US and also is working at IIT here in IT systems in India, I can tell you that there is a definite synergy between the research and teaching. Whenever I teach a course, there are many things that come from my lab, and I can talk about them extempore because I have done those things. My students are doing those things in my lab. So there is a different synergy. Therefore, it's important that every faculty member in our country, every lecturer, every assistant professor, every associate professor and professors actually do research, like real innovative research, and bring them to the classrooms. That is how we'll be able to train the next generation of scholars. Otherwise, we'll just simply be teaching from 20-year-old textbooks. And that is not going to be enough for our country to become #1 in the educational system in the world by 2040. For that, we need to really bring it out. And that's where faculty are really key to many of these things, really. And then this is where the Indian knowledge systems comes in. Of course, it is in that holistic perspective as well. And what really is this Indian knowledge system? What is it that we mean by Indian knowledge system? Because if you talk to many people, they will tell you all kinds of things. What really is meant by the Indian knowledge systems, at least in the context of NEP and what we do at Indian Knowledge Systems Division of Ministry of Education at AICTE, is that this is essentially the rich knowledge, the rich heritage, and the knowledge, eternal knowledge that was created, discovered, and acquired by Indians over several millennia, several thousands of years. We don't even know how long ago. And in the Indian subcontinent, Indian subcontinent is called a subcontinent for a reason. We are really a continent, and it's as big as a continent. I mean, not in terms of the size, but at least in terms of all the diversities. You can find all kinds of climates, all kinds of people, all kinds of weather patterns here, all kinds of biodiversity in our country.
Conversation कभी-कभी नहीं जाता, मेरा तो जाता है.
Okay, was there something? Okay, so yeah, so that is essentially the Indian knowledge system that we are talking about. And where will you find this Indian knowledge system? Essentially, if you look at the repositories of this Indian knowledge, we can find it in manuscripts, shastras, which are essentially your systematized knowledge. But then in addition to that systematized knowledge, which is there in manuscripts, shastras, whether you talk about Ayurveda as a shastra, whether you talk about Nyaya as a shastra, Vyakarana as a shastra, all of these things are shastras, which are systematized. There is a systematic application of theories, they have their foundational concepts, they have their methods, all those things are there. So it is very systematic. Those are essentially called systematic, the shastras. So that is present in manuscripts, oral traditions, and all those things. But in addition to that, we also know that we have a lot of knowledge, traditional knowledge, in our folk songs, stories, arts, handicrafts, traditional skills, and also the oral traditions, all the stories that our grandmothers tell us, all the practices that our grandmothers and village artisans and everybody actually shows them. Those are all essentially traditional knowledge. The tribal communities have a big repository of this kind of traditional knowledge. So Indian knowledge systems includes both of them. It includes the systematized knowledge and the traditional knowledge as well. So that is essentially what we mean when we talk about Indian knowledge system, Indian knowledge and Indian knowledge systems. And why should we really study this IKS? That is a very relevant and an important question. And then, is there something so unique about Indian way, Indian knowledge? What is that Indianness in the Indian knowledge system? Is it, let's say, even if it is there, is it worth studying what our ancestors thought several millennia ago? How is it relevant today? Let's say, even if it is relevant today, how is it important to you and your students? What is the connection of India's prosperity to the Indian knowledge system? These are very, very important questions that we need to really think about. So I'm going to say that, yes, there is an Indian way. It is worth studying what our ancestors did and think. It is relevant today, and it is important to you and students. And India's prosperity is related to the Indian knowledge systems as well. But then at this time, I would also reminded of the warning, or rather the caution that Mahakavi Kalidasa gives in his Malakagnimitra. Puranamityeva nasadhu sarvam nachapi kavyam navavityamadhyam santah pariksham chatarat bhajante modah parat pratyayaneya buddhi. He says, only he talks about it because Mahakavi Kalidasa was a Kavi. So he talks about it in the context of Kavya. So he says, just because a Kavya is old, it is not a sadhu, nasadu sarvam. It is not the best one, because just because it is old. And just because something is new, you should not discard it, saying that, oh, this is new, old is gold and all that. Because he says, Santah pariksham chatarat bhajante. The wise people will actually analyze each of these things based on the merit of the case. Whether it is old or new, they will actually analyze it, evaluate it based on the its own merits. Whereas the fools will be led by what other people, by the opinions of other people. So we should really be thinking about these things whenever we talk about Indian knowledge systems. In fact, our tradition very, very, very clearly says, you see, this is what Kalidasa is saying some 1500 years ago. Same thing is said in one and everything. If you go to Upanishads, that also it says. Buddha said the same thing. Everybody in our Indian knowledge systems, it is said that you should question everything. It is a questioning civilization. It is not a civilization where we will accept things just because somebody said it. We will accept things only if it meets the conditions of logic, rationality, and all those tests. It has to pass through those tests, and there's no other alternative. So you'll see that we always used to have debates. Why debates? Because we question everything. And we should, in that spirit, whether we are talking about Indian knowledge systems that have been handed down to us from centuries of our traditions, or the modern knowledge systems, we should be a civilization that questions it. And that will be one of the biggest contribution of our country, if we can actually bring it out, that we question everything and we really accept things only if we are satisfied with what the pramanas say. And that essentially is the scientific approach to knowledge systems. And this is where it becomes very important, because if you look at things around today, unfortunately, there are all kinds of basically myths and unscientific claims about Indian knowledge systems. Some people will say, oh, there is Tulsidas ji's Hanuman Chalisa has speed of light, Yuga Sahasra Yojana Parabharam. And then somebody says, oh, there is string theory mentioned in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Because it says, Mattah Paradaram Nasti Kinchidast Dhananjaya, Mai Sarvamidam Kotam Sutre Maniganaya. They take that word sutra, it means string in English, they will translate it to string, and then they'll say, oh, this is string theory. Just because he says, I am the string of all the pearls in a garland, so this is essentially equivalent to string theory, which is totally nonsense. It is not talking about that. It is not talking about string theory. And on the other hand, there will be other type of people who will say, no, we did not learn anything. Indian science is a myth. Indian math was not rigorous. Indians did not know how to do these things. All we learned was from the West after 1947 type of thing. There is really a big paucity, lack of genuine scholarship in this field. Because of that, you'll see all kinds of these WhatsApp messages, all these nonsensical things which are on the two extremes, which are unscientific and which are contrary to what the Indian knowledge systems really talk about. And therefore they do damage to the genuine knowledge traditions of India. These kind of extreme claims, and then whether on both sides of the aisle, really do the damage to the Indian knowledge system tradition, and also the scholars who are involved in Indian knowledge systems research. So this is the reason why it is important for us, especially the higher education institutions, to take that leadership position, so that we can understand, research the scientific and technological heritage of India in a rational way, in a scientific way, so that again we take what is needed, what is relevant for today, we discard what is not relevant for today, and then go forward, and then make it something that will advance the state of the art and take it forward. And Indian knowledge systems, whenever you talk about it, people think, oh, this is all about spiritual knowledge, this is all about Vedas, Upanishads. But you know what one of the Upanishads says? It says, avidya mrutyum tirtva vidyam mrutamashprute. Here it says, vidya, using vidya, you attain amrutatva, the moksha. But then it also says, avidya mrutyum tirtva. Here the avidya is referring to the knowledge that is relevant to this world. So avidya is essentially all the technology, science, the things that we are learning to live our life. So it says, use this avidya, use this knowledge of this world to cross this world and live in this world properly. Then use the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, to attain the amrutatva. Such a beautiful integration of what is para and apara is found in Upanishads. So this is the kind of understanding that we need, and we need to really take it forward. To do that, we need higher education institutions to really take this forward in a genuine way. And especially this is possible in the context of the NEP, primarily because NEP is talking about multidisciplinary, multilinguistic learning of technical subjects, all kinds of learning. So essentially, whenever we talk about these kind of things, it is possible now. It perhaps was not possible earlier, but with NEP 2020, it is going to be possible. And here I would like to distinguish between two things, because whenever we talk about IKS, we say, oh yeah, it is scientific, but what is really going to be the contribution of the science? What is the science that we are going to contribute? We have SCMs, TEMs now, we have X-ray diffraction machines, we have X-ray machines too, so we have CT scans. How is the Indian knowledge systems going to help there? This is where I would like to distinguish what we normally call as science is really there are two parts to it. There are scientific principles and there is a scientific method. The scientific method is really a body of techniques which we use for investigating any phenomena in the lab, in the real field, or anywhere else, so that we can either acquire new knowledge, we can correct knowledge or past knowledge that was false or misleading, and then integrate the whatever observations that we have in the previous knowledge and create a expanded body of knowledge. So this scientific method is always objective. Whether you do that experiment, whether I use the X-ray machine or you use the X-ray machine or somebody else uses X-ray machine in a different continent, as long as we follow the proper procedure, the results will be the same. It is very objective method. But the scientific principles, on the other hand, are very subjective. And what do I mean by that? It basically means that the way that you look at the world, that essentially is the basis of your scientific principles. So for example, the Indian mathematics is very algorithmic. So it follows like a steps. It is like an algorithm. You follow these steps, you will get the sine series and sine value of the sine theta. Whereas if you look at the Greek mathematics or the Euclidean mathematics, it is more of axiomatic. There are these axioms that are the foundational principles. So the way that we look at the same reality is kind of different. And that is where the scientific principles are different in the different traditions, knowledge traditions. So the Indian knowledge systems, when we talk about where will be the contribution of the Indian knowledge systems, it will be much, much bigger in the scientific principles, not as it may or may not have that big of an impact in the methods, because methods get updated every time, whereas the principles remain constant, and those are updated much less frequently. Whereas the methods are something that you can update whenever you have a new advancement in any technology, for example. This is again to understand. We need to understand what is science and pseudoscience. So we are talking about how scientific principles are subjective, scientific method is objective, and all that. But when we are saying this, what really is a scientific principle? What is a pseudoscience principle? For that, we can basically take help of what Popper said in 1962. Essentially, he says that Karl Popper said that if you have all statements or systems of statements, in order for it to be ranked as scientific, must be capable of conflicting with possible or conceivable observation. If you cannot think of a experiment where you can have yes or no, both should be possible answers, then it is not, then only it is scientific. If it is not possible for that, if you only get yes or if you always get no as an answer in your that theory, according to that theory, then it is a pseudoscience. So for example, just to give you a very, very simple example. So let's say I formulate a theory that if I heat water, if I put water on a stove, that is on a fire, it will get warm. That is a scientific theory. Why? Because there is a possibility that the water can be cold, become cold, or it can become warmer when I put. There are two possibilities. Both are equally possible. As I do the experiments, I know that, okay, we will only get warmer. That is the only possibility there. So that is under those given experimental conditions. So that essentially is what is a scientific thing. Whereas if I say, oh, I dreamt about this thing, and I think I feel that this is what it is going to be, then that is really pseudoscience, because a feeling or something that you cannot falsify is not going to be a falsifiable. You will not have a falsifiable theory, therefore it is not scientific. And essentially, again, that scientific science, as I was talking about, the scientific principles plus scientific method, there is something called a PEL model of science. So that again is a little bit extension of that, and you will see again two places where the Indian knowledge systems can contribute. One is the presupposition, is essentially your like scientific principles, which is very subjective, and we have evidence, which is coming from your scientific method, so it is very objective. And also you have, how do you link your evidence with the presupposition or the testing the hypothesis? So that is essentially your logic. That again is very objective. So Indian knowledge systems have two places where they can really, really contribute. One is the presupposition, which is again which is subjective, and the logic. How do you connect your evidence to presupposition? These are the two areas where Indian knowledge systems can have a very unique contribution. I will give you a few specific examples as we go through later. And basically, what does NEP 2020 say about IKS? So now that we have talked about IKS, we have talked about NEP 2020. What does it say really? It says in the first paragraph itself that the rich heritage of ancient and eternal Indian knowledge and thought has been a guiding light for this policy. It says in the first paragraph of the NEP document. And then it talks about curricular integration of essential subjects, skills, and capacities in section 4, towards a holistic and multidisciplinary education in section 11, and catalyzing quality academic research in all fields through the NRF in section 17, talks about professional education in 2023, promotion of Indian languages in section 22. It talks about Indian knowledge system in multiple places throughout the Indian NEP 2020. And so that essentially was the discussion about the NEP 2020. So since I'm representing the Indian Knowledge Systems Division of the Ministry of Education, this was formed about 2 years ago. And I joined this division about 3-4 months ago. And the whole vision of this division is to promote interdisciplinary research on all aspects of Indian knowledge systems, and also to preserve and disseminate IKS for further research and societal applications. Further innovations and societal applications. This is essentially what our vision is, and we work on these basically different things. So what can you do for the Indian knowledge system? Essentially, you can work on preserving original traditions and texts through appropriate means, and you can do research by studying the original text. We have more than 2-3 million manuscripts, 90% of which have not even been looked at. When I say not even been looked at, we don't even know what is the title of those manuscripts. The title of those manuscripts and those kind of cataloging has been done only for 10% of the manuscripts. And of the 10%, less than 5% has been digitized. Of the things that have been digitized, less than 2% have been studied. And why is that important? Did you know that we did not have access to Chanakya's Arthashastra until 1906? Before that, India lost Chanakya's Arthashastra. Imagine what is Arthashastra. It is such an important document that crystallizes Indian thought on economics, basic politics, and how to conduct all the basically polity. Something as important as that was not there. It was lying in a library in Mysuru, and a librarian, out of his personal interest, studied and basically transcribed that book, published it in 1909. Then people saw that this was the Chanakya's Arthashastra that was thought to be lost, and then they found out, other people started looking for it. They found 3 more copies, and by 1919, the first critical edition of Arthashastra was published. So less than a century ago, about a century ago now. So what other manuscripts are there like this? What other kinds of things in Pashu Ayurveda, Vriksha Ayurveda, basically Ayurveda itself are there that we don't know about? There are many things like that we need to do, and who will do it? A Sanskrit scholar will not do it. It is up to us who are in the technical disciplines, who are in the disciplines that are there, who have to read it. Because it is like saying that an English literature professor must preserve the engineering textbooks or medical textbooks. Even if they understand the language, they will not understand what is being said, because it is highly technical content. How can somebody who is not trained in medicine come and read medical textbooks, even though they may be reading learning the language? It is exactly that. That is the same problem with Sanskrit manuscripts. Many manuscripts that are out there, because these are highly technical texts written by experts in technologies. They were not written by people who are experts in language. They were written by people who were experts in technologies and science. So it requires scientists to learn the language and then read those original texts. And then for that, you will have to, obviously not all of us know Sanskrit. So it is important for us to collaborate with traditional scholars, artists, experts to get that knowledge and then understand it in the proper context. And also, it is important for us to train generations of scholars. So for that, it is important to develop new specific courses which will focus on IKS for your discipline. So if you are in medicine, please try to develop focuses on maybe course on developing all the things for medicine preparation in Ayurveda, or cataloging of different plants in Ayurveda, or things like that. So specific courses that basically do rely on the IKS, and then try to infuse IKS into existing curriculum. Throughout the curriculum, it should be present from the school to high school to undergraduate education to PhD. We are trying to do at the IKS division some things to do this, but if you can do that too, that will be wonderful. And to disseminate the knowledge, it's very, very important that we disseminate what we learn. And doing that, because we have a very, as I was saying, there is really scarcely a few hundred experts who are genuinely working in the IKS knowledge. I had traveled as the national coordinator for the IKS division. Me and my team, we traveled across the country in the month of December, to meet with people. Because when you look at it, it is appalling that we don't have many more scholars working in this area. It is only few dedicated people who are working day and night without any kind of recognition or anything. They are just working in this area out of their passion. It's important for us to train many more thousands of people who can actually bring scientific this thing and do research in a scientific way, and then disseminate. For that, we need to disseminate the knowledge. And again, training the teachers is most critical thing, and you all can participate in that. If you are a teacher, either you can train yourself, or once you are trained, you can train other colleagues too. And how can the IKS division of MOE help you? We can help you in setting up IKS centers, research proposals, writing outcome-based proposal writing workshops. We are conducting student internships, faculty development programs, hands-on workshops in specialized IKS areas, projects on digital conservation efforts. These are all things that we are working on. And so if there is something else, we can actually talk about these specifics as we go forward. But essentially, these are things that initiatives that of IKS division that we can help you take your vision forward. And as I was mentioning earlier, is there an Indian way? Because we talked about this Indian knowledge system, and I promised you that I will answer that question. Whether is there an Indian way that is important when we talk about Indian knowledge systems? Is there something uniquely Indian? So if you look at the current models of development, these are unsustainable and are in direct conflict with nature. That is self-evident right now. And if you look at the rising inequalities, whether you talk about in the capitalist systems or the failure of the communist and socialist economics, really show you that there is a need for new paradigms of development. There is an Indian way that is sustainable and strives for the welfare of all. It will work for everybody and is sustainable. In that sense, there is something unique about the Indian way of knowledge systems. And if we want to become the knowledge power that we talk about, we want to become the Vishwaguru, we need to understand what is our heritage first. And we need to really disseminate what this Indian way of doing things is to the world. And we cannot do that if we don't ourselves know it. And if you look at what is the uniqueness about the Indian knowledge systems, the civilizational ethos of the Bharat is that nature is divine and we are part of it. Essentially, the whole Ishavasya Upanishad begins with that. Ishavasya Vidam Jagat Sarva. And Bhagavan Shiva is the Nataraja, where the dance and the dancer cannot be separated. The creator and the creation cannot be separated. He is essentially the epitome of this thought process. And it's not just that it is only there in Sanskritam and Upanishads and all. If you go to Arunachal Pradesh, they call themselves as Doni or Pole Ume. That essentially means we are children of sun and the moon. And all the traditions of India recognize that we are really part of the nature, not superior. And there is the whole connection between the living and non-living things. And conservation of nature is not for somebody else, but it is really to protect our own life. And that's essentially the holistic approach that is grounded in reality. That is the real need for addressing some of the existential challenges like climate change, whether we talk about environmental degradation, biodiversity, disappearing biodiversity. All these things are really connected to that thought processes, and then bringing in this thought process will really help in making those attitudinal changes which are really necessary. I would like to end my lecture with a few examples that I want to give you. So what is this holistic approach that I'm talking about? If you look at India, historically, even now and all, so agriculture and trade are two very important activities and are the foundations for the Indian society. Those brown areas that I'm showing here are the areas that our traders used to go and trade on the ships and all that. And if you think about this, this actually requires navigation in the open ocean. Whereas if you think about Greece, they used to do island hopping from one island to the other one. So whereas Indian navigators needed to navigate across the open oceans, and what that requires is essentially you need to have a very good ability to predict when you are going to have rains, when you are going to have winds, in what direction. So essentially your weather prediction, and then where will the water happen? I mean, what will be present, and what will be the amount of rains, because this is related to both navigation and agriculture. In India, I mean, if you look at the confirmed evidence, archaeological evidence of agriculture, it is over 10,000 years before present. And even Shatapada Brahmana talks about the water, and it talks about hydrologic cycle. It talks about Agnir Vedhu, Mojayate, Dhuma, Ampranaha, Amprat, Drushti, talks about how the vapors are created by the heat or the fire, and then vapors will create the cloud, and then cloud give the rain. And it talks about rainfall as Purva Chitti. That means something that you can know, a priori, as we call it. And then there is that relationship between all these different atmosphere, basically your biosphere and the space and the agriculture. So the agriculture is essentially your earth, related to your earth, and then Bhu, and then your Bhuvaha is your environment and atmosphere. That is what it talks about. And then the Swaha is the Swarga, or the basically the thing about that is the space. So it talks about the relationship between these three, and there they use a multiple factors that influence all these three, so that you can actually predict what is going to happen in agriculture, and then you can predict what is going to happen in the environment by rains and all that. Here I'm not talking about astrology. Please remember that I'm not talking about astrology here. I'm talking about actual astronomy and weather science. So this is again what, for example, many rishis talk about it. Rishi Kashyapa, Parashara, Gautama, Vatsa, they all talk about different rainfall prediction methods. What is very interesting among these methods is that each of them talk about slightly different methods, different approaches for rainfall prediction, which are much more suitable for different locales in India. So, for example, you can look at Krishi Parashara and figure out that based on the weather that he describes and the rainfall methods that he talks about and the characteristics of rainfall, probably Krishi Parashara was written in around Punjab, Delhi region. That's what you can actually kind of infer from that. So they talk about both short-term and long-term weather forecasts. So they talk about something that is like very, very short, like 1 day or so, or next few days. And then they talk about even long-term predictions, like 6 to 7 months in advance. In fact, Varaha Mihira, the famous astronomer, in his Brihat Samhita talks about Garbhottama. So essentially, that happens 6 months before 6 months before the actual rainfall. So if you plot that on the Earth's orbit around the sun, you will see that he's talking about what will happen here based on observations that you make here on this side. And this actually has some basis in the modern weather forecasting, modern meteorology. And you actually see some of the jet streams and all those things forming. There are some rituals in Atharvana Veda which actually talk about observing the Kritika Nakshatra in December, around December, Kartik Masa, and looking at whether Kritika Nakshatra is cloudy or is it clear. And it says that if it is cloudy, you are going to get rains. You're not going to get rains, and if it is clear, you're going to get good rains 6 months later. And how does that happen? It has to do with the movement of the jet streams, for example. And again, this is very similar to what we do in the modern weather forecasting. Nowcasting, short range, medium forecast, long range forecast, all those things are really something. So essentially, this shows you how the knowledge of agriculture, weather, rainfall prediction, and astronomy, and was integrated into the calendar formulation. And these are all formed into different shastras. And this is one holistic approach that is really grounded in reality. And you can again think of some things in the mathematics as well. If you want to represent numbers, why do we want to represent numbers? Because India was really an oral tradition. All the knowledge transmitted was primarily through oral traditions. And if you have to remember a mathematics text, you can remember it if it is set to a particular chandas, particular meter, and if it is like a shloka that you can memorize, because it's got a musical quality to it. And this is where that holistic education comes in. You are using both your left brain and the right brain. You are using the musical tendencies and these kind of things to learn something that is as logical as mathematics. So initially there were what is called as this Bhut Sankhya that was used. Aryabhatta has its own method. Katapayadi system was another method. These are all different ways to represent numbers. In Bhut Sankhya, you would say eyes means 2 because you have 2 eyes normally. And if I say fingers, that would represent 10, for example. And if I would say Bahu, arms, 2 arms. So similarly, Rishis means 7, Sapta Rishis. And Vasus means 8 because there are Ashta Vasus. Rudras is Ekadasha Rudras. Adityas is Dvadasha Adityas. So you basically have things like these numbers that is essentially called your Bhut Sankhya. Katapayadi system, on the other hand, is a very, very unique system that is based on your our Varnamala. Varnamala itself is another very, very scientifically done thing. Okay, I mean, I will not get into that, but essentially, you know that this is probably, not probably, is the most scientific way to organize sounds. The most scientific way to organize sounds. And the whole discipline of linguistics, phonology, and everything essentially comes from Panini and even Acharyas before that. That is essentially what the unique contribution of India there. And again, this whole Katapayadi system is essentially uses those Varnamala. And it was there described first by Shankara Varma in Sadratnamala. What does he say? Nangavachan se shunyani sankhya katapayadaya vishchetu pantyahala sankhya naja chintyo haraswara. So essentially what he's saying is Kakha Gaghanga Characha Jajhanga is 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. And similarly Tata Dadhana Tata Dadhana are 1, 0, again 10 digits. And then Papa Bhavama is 1 to 5. Yara Lava Shasha Saha La is 1 to 9. And Ach, all the swaras are essentially 0. And then uses a principle of Ankanam Vamato Gati. That means you represent numbers from right to left, not left to right. So that is another principle. That is, so essentially you're indicating the digits starting from the units place, tens place, hundreds place. You are going from that, because other way around you will not know. So if I say for 34, if I have to say 3 and 4, you would not know if I'm going to say 3, 4, 0, 6, 5, 7, or I will end at 3 and 4. So if, on the other hand, if I tell you that Ankana Mamato Gatihi, you would always know that when I say 3, I'm meaning, if I'm saying 4, I'm meaning 4 is in the units place. So then I can say 3 is in the tens place. So it is 34. You know that. So there is no confusion. So Ankana Mamato Gatihi is very closely tied to the place value system that we use. So this is an example of a Katabayali system. So Kaka, Kiki, Kuku, all of those essentially mean 1, because Ka is 1. So if you take this word Vacha, Va really represents Yarala Va, right? Is 4. And Cha represents 6. You can see that there. Cha is 6. So Vacha, remember Ankana Vamato Gatihi? So is 4 and 6. 4 and 6. Vamato Gatihi. 4 and 6. So it is 64. If I say Vachami, again same thing. Va is 4. Cha is 6. Mi is 5. So 4, 6, 5. See, there is no confusion. Vachami, Vacha. So I always say 4, 6, 5. So 564 number. So if I say Abhirama, A is 0, Bhi is 4, Ra is 2, Ma is 5. Abhirama therefore means 0, 4, 2, 5. That means 5240. And if I say Shyama, you have to ignore Sh, because that is Mishretupa Antyahala. You have to consider only the Antahala. So it is Sh is ignored, Ya is counted. Ya is 1, Ma is 5. Right? So you can basically count things like that. Okay. And then if you, I mean, whereas if you go into Aryabhatta system, it's a little bit more complicated. He talks about, because Aryabhatta needed to use big numbers, so he was using these big numbers. For that, he had come up with a more complicated system. So, for example, Vacha, the same thing. I'll not get into the details of this because I want to get to a better example that might be of interest to you. So again, this is used to represent very, very large numbers. That's all you need to know. These things were used, for example, for memorizing, for example, the value of pi. So, for example, in the same Sadratnamala, he talks about Badhram Buddhisiddha Janma Ganita Shraddhasma Yad Bhubagi. That means value of pi. If you decode this, it gives you the value of pi until 15 digits. Now, there is another verse which talks about value of pi to 31 digits. This is the shloka. Gopi Bhagya Madhurvat Shrungish Shodha Sandhiga Kalajivita Khatava Galahalava Sandhara. Gopi Ga is, this doesn't follow that Ankana Vamatogati. So it just follows the exact value from this side. So Ga is 3, P, Pa is 1, Bha is 4, and you can so on and so forth. You can see that. So this is how they used a shloka which talks about Krishna to show a value of pi till 31 digits. So you're enjoying the verse for its poetry, but at the same time you're getting to memorize the value of pi to 31 digits. Now the interesting question that I would like you to think about is, why did they need pi value of this kind of accuracy? Because Indian mathematics, unlike the Greek mathematics, was very utilitarian. We did not pursue mathematics because it was a holy science or some kind of a pure science. We said all sciences in India were pragmatic, practical. And so this had to be used somewhere with this level of accuracy. And what does this level of accuracy mean? Where should we be using this? Is something that I would like you to think about. And this was just used in basically for value of pi, mathematics and astronomy, right? But there was another thing that was also used in music. Venkatamaki in 18th century, in his Sangeeta Saramrita, used the Kattapayali system for identifying, naming all the ragas so that you could know what were the swaras of a particular Melakarta raga. Sampurna raga is something that has all the 7 notes. And there are 72 Melakarta ragas that are possible. So then based on that, he formulated this kind of a chart. So you could actually figure out, just by knowing the name of a raga, you can know what are the notes in that raga. So look at how beautiful the system was, which essentially takes the knowledge of phonetics, The Chandas Shastra, mathematics, and music, and all integrated into this whole, all kinds of Shastras. So whether you're talking about music or astronomy, mathematics, I mean, it's all so well integrated. Now I would like to talk about for the next 10 minutes about something that is very, very, hopefully more relatable to you. So if you look at Ayurveda and allopathy, where is that, what is the difference between Indian knowledge systems? And where is this that you can contribute? Essentially, if you take a look at Ayurveda, the way that we look at the body is based on the Tridosha concept. It talks about how you have Vata, Pitta, Kapha, which again have come from the Panchamahabhutas. And it talks about how these Panchamahabhutas have influenced the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and how these three doshas will influence the body and how their balance is maintained and all that. Whereas if you take, so it's essentially a very systemic approach. It takes a systems approach. Whereas if you take a look at the allopathy, it is a reductionist approach. It will say you have a digestive system, circulatory system, nervous system. Each of them have their own organs, lungs, heart, liver, pancreas, intestines, all those things, right? It is a very reductionist system, approach. This kind of an approach is also seen when you look at the food, for example. If you want to classify the food, so remember, this is, you're looking at the same human body, but you're approaching it from different scientific principles. This was the thing that I was talking about earlier, that the science is consisting of scientific principles and the objective method. This is where the principles are different. This gives you a totally different view of looking at the human system. So again, it will apply to the things as like classification of food. You can classify it based on the modern Western concepts like proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, fats, vitamins, minerals. But if you look at Ayurvedic classification, you classify based on rasas, shadrasas, virya, vipaka, prabhava. What is the influence on the three doshas? What is the impact on the mind? All those things are considered based on different acharyas will consider different things in Ayurveda. So this classification, you see how you're looking at the same piece of food, same plate of food there, from all these different angles. So this approach is different, this approach is different. The principles are different. But then you can use, for example, so I hope with these two examples, I'm able to show you that the ability to look at the same system from two different scientific principles is different. And that scientific principle comes from the way that the civilization, it comes from this, it's a civilizational outlook. It comes from the way that the civilization imagines its relationship between man and the nature, humanity and the nature, and that's how these things come up. So, whereas if you take a look at the bhasma, for example, it's used in Ayurveda very commonly. So, what is it that is done? You have all different types of preparatory methods, like you do a lot of puta and all that, marana and all those different preparatory steps. So, you take metals, minerals, germs, you heat it, cool it, add some juices like lime juice or some other herbs, you mix them, grind them, again heat it, do repeated heating on those putas. So essentially what you are generating is nanoparticles. This is understood using even now using the model science, you actually can understand this. So you can take these nanoparticles, you can study them from different methods, using methods. You see, if you take the classical Ayurveda methods, so it talks about the varna, the color of it, nischandratvam, it should not have any luster, and varitarai, if you should take that basically bhasma, if you put it on the, sprinkle it on the stagnant water in a glass of water, it should float. Unama test, you put a grain of rice on it to see how much of surface tension it can hold. Rekha purnata, how, I mean, it will fill your, basically your, the ridges in your finger. Slakshatvam, Sukshukshma, Anjana Sannibha, Churnatvam, Gatarasatvam, all these things are ways in which Ayurveda used to test the bhasma. These are methods. Remember, anybody can actually go and look at Varna, and whether I'm sitting here or in US or in Antarctica, I should be able to, if the experimental conditions are the same, I would come to the same conclusion. It is an objective method. Whereas, if you look at the modern methods, you can use a SEM, you can use a TEM or XRD, XPS, gel electrophoresis.
Sir, voice is not clear. It is not audible.
I think there is some issue with sir's end.
Okay, sir. We shall wait, sir. Nice discussion. And it is relevant to pharmacy profession.
Hello. Ah.
I think sir has some network issue and sir is joining soon. In the meantime, I request the participants that please post the question in the chat box. Please try to think and ask the questions. At least you can post the question in the chat box. So at the end of the session, we can answer those questions.
You able to hear me? Somehow I thought there was some
Yes,
loss of
yes, sir.
connection.
Yes, sir. Now audible. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Are my slides visible, or maybe I need to share again?
Yes, yes. Visible, sir.
Okay, wonderful. So whether you use these methods or the methods prescribed in Ayurveda, that doesn't really matter. But what matters is how you look at the body, how you look at foods. That scientific principle is going to be very, very useful. And then again, we also talk about these approaches in a very easy to transmit this thing. Storytelling is another important, very fascinating aspect of our Indian knowledge systems, right? I mean, you must have heard about the story of Vagbhata, where he talks about, I mean, there is Maharshi comes and wants to test him and asks as a parrot, Shuka, Koruk, 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 who is healthy, who is healthy, who is healthy? And then Vagbhata responds, Hitabhuk, Mitabhuk, Rutubhuk. The one who eats in moderation, one who eats in what is good for his body, his or her body, and then who eats according to the season. And you see the whole principle of health and wellness, eating in moderation, eating what is good for your health, Hitabhuk, and then eating in moderation, Mitabhuk, and eating according to the seasons, Rutubhuk, is there in that little one line, this thing. Very melodious this thing, a sentence of Sanskritam in a beautiful story. Koruk, 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 hitabuk, vitabuk, rutabuk. Imagine teaching this to a second grade child. They will remember this for life. And you don't need to tell them in all these through big manuals as to what should they eat and all. If they understand these basic principles of hitabuk, vitabuk, and rutabuk. This is the holistic approach that I was talking about, that is grounded in reality. This is where that the Indian knowledge system can really contribute and is important as we look into the context of the NEP 2020. And again, I want to emphasize on one thing, that how can the AICTE division, AICTE's IKS Division of Ministry of Education help? We are essentially going to help out in terms of the new IKS centers, research proposals, all these other initiatives. Please visit our website, iksindia.org. which is essentially a new website. And then I have a very special announcement to make for you all today, that today we are announcing 3 new initiatives today at 2:30 p.m. You can watch the information session at 2:30 on the AICTE's media link on YouTube, live link. We are announcing 1,000 internships and competitive research proposals, interdisciplinary research proposals in IKS, and setting up IKS centers proposals, basically IKS centers around the country. So these are 3 initiatives that we are taking, and we are announcing them today at 2:30. And all of you who may be interested in these things, please do come and join us on the YouTube link of AICTE. And with that, I would like to introduce my team. Basically, we are 5 people there. Myself, I'm Ganti Murthy, I'm the national coordinator, and my colleague, Dr. Anuradha Chaudhary, she is the coordinator and also a faculty member at IIT Kharagpur. And then we have 3 excellent research fellows, Dr. Sanjeev Panchal, Anurag Deshpande, and Shreyas Kovrekar. And you can contact us anytime on coiks@aicte-india.org. And I would like to end with what basically Baba Dayom said in a conference in New Delhi on Environmental Protection Conference. In the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. This is where our role as teachers is so important, because our students will understand only what they are taught. Then only they will love what they understand, and they will only conserve only what they love. So if you want to preserve, promote, and disseminate and reinvigorate the Indian knowledge system, it's important that we teach it to as many people as possible. With that, dhanyavad, and thank you so much for patient listening. Dhanyavad. Namaste.
Thank you very much, sir, for a wonderful talk on Indian knowledge system and NEP, National Education Policy. Sir, you started with the talk on how to need the revisit of Indian National Education Policy and school education, then foundation literacy, holistic learning, integrals, and enjoyable and engaging. Then you also gave a light on light versus tight. So the incorporation of Indian knowledge system should be light, but it should be tight, and that you have given more emphasis on that. You focused on professional education versus adult education. Teaching should be according to the mother language. That is one of the main component of new education policy, and how the technology can be used, and online and digitalization, which is far before the COVID pandemic. So that purpose of incorporation of Indian knowledge system is already started by NEP long back. It means it is in the process. He also emphasizes the strength of Central Advisory Board of Education, financing and implementation, and to the stakeholders who are going to be benefited by this. And apart from that, you have given a considerable input on higher education, where consolidation and restructuring, holistic and multidisciplinary education system, then optimal learning, energized faculty, and then vocational education. And you have given very good examples of science, where scientific principles and scientific method can be expressed. And like it is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita in 4.38, Tatvidhi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya Updekshanti Te Jnanam Jnanena Satdarshana. So these are some of the things which are there already in our tradition. But how that those information and those knowledge can be percolated to the present scenario and good for the or betterment for everyone. Then you have given the PEL model of science, and then what we can do being a researchers, and especially pharmacists. We all are pharmacists and working in the field of health related sciences. And here, sir, I want to give you one good input that we at Bharati Vidyapith Pune College of Pharmacy, we are working on evidence-based medicines, whereby the Ayurvedic medicines which are already there, and what are the scientific explanations can be done for those, like Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and then how they are related, and simple like Triphala. So how Triphala is going to act. So this type of studies we are working on, and we are working in collaboration with Ayurvedic College of our Bharati Vidyapith. Sir, we want to establish again IKS center at our university, and as I talked to you in our IKS meet there in the Rishud University, that we are interested to incorporate some credit courses or certificate courses, whereby like nutraceuticals or health related certificate courses can be started by our universities. So that freedom is with us because we are a deemed university and we can start some new courses. So, sir, we need this suggestion from your side also. So I'd ask or invite the audience to ask if you are having some questions from Sir Murthy sir. Audience.
Sir, one question is there in the chat box.
Just sir, which system is more ancient, one the Siddha or Ayurveda, as per your view? So, sir, Mr.
I'm not really qualified to answer that because I'm not a medical doctor and I have not studied the Siddha or Ayurveda in depth. So I would respectfully defer answering that question because I'm not an expert on it.
But Amol sir, what I have heard, or to the best of my knowledge, Ayurveda is more ancient as compared to Siddha, and Siddha is exploratory and it is based in Tamil Nadu and southern states. Whereas, because I have talked to some Siddha experts also, and they mentioned that though Siddha and Ayurveda they go parallel, but Ayurveda is slightly ancient as compared to Siddha. This, as per my knowledge.
Sir, if you are having a timeline for that, because we are regularly teaching alternative system of medicine in the pharmaceutics 1 in first year only. I'm always getting confused with all these things to answer this question when students are asking who is the ancient one. So I have placed the state question to you.
Okay, so sir, what best I can do is I can contact again with the Siddha expert, because I am in contact with them, and I'll get you. I can get in touch with you.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes.
For attending questions.
Any other questions from audience?
Yes. Sir, may I ask one question?
Yes, sure.
Sir, thanks a lot for a wonderful session. My question to the sir is regarding the initial slides where he had described the school education part. So now it is how the students will opt for different streams, because now it is till 12th they are under the same category. So now here we are seeing that after 10 we opt for the science, we opt for the commerce, we opt for the art. So now that is been streamlined. The choices of the branches or choices of the faculty will be streamlined.
There will still be, thank you so much, Santoshi, for that. There will still be the branches as what we have right now. But what the students will get is greater freedom to take up more courses that are of interest. For example, it says that you can take up to 40% of the courses in online and using the online portals and all that. And also it talks about the credit bank system. So I did not really touch upon that, but that credit bank system and this flexibility for students and bringing all disciplines together in one consolidation of institutions is geared towards basically giving a lot more freedom to the student in terms of choosing the courses. So essentially, what will happen is we are not going to discard the disciplines right now, what we have. We are going to have them. But then, in addition to that, a student, for example, who is doing an engineering right now cannot take an arts class on painting. Now, this NEP will give the freedom to take 1 or 2 classes in that. For example, the AICTE is right now rolling out what they are calling as a IKS minor. So the whole idea is, in addition to the engineering, the students are going to take 7 to 8 courses, 1 per semester of their 4-year engineering course, so that they can actually get an IKS minor in addition to their degree. In that IKS minor, there are 2 or 3 foundational courses out of the 6 or 7 courses, and the rest of them are actually going to be electives. And some of them are going to be discipline-specific electives. So, for example, a civil engineering student will study something related to structures and how the buildings were constructed in IKS from the Narada Shilpa Sutra, Shastra, or something like that. So they will actually study discipline-specific things. In addition to that, they can take other courses. So this is for the IKS. But what NEP is saying is this will be valid for any other discipline as well. So that is the kind of freedom that they're giving. So they're not talking about discarding the disciplines, but they're trying to augment what is happening.
Thank you.
Sir, there is another question from Dr. Kuldeep Ramteke. He's asking that is there any impact of Ayurvedic process for preparation of Bhasma and the modern process on the quality of Bhasma?
Again, I'm not really qualified to answer that. I would not venture to answer it because it is something that, I mean, you are the experts. I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm not a trained doctor, Ayurvedic or the modern MBBS, those kind of a allopathic doctor. I'm an engineer, hardcore engineer. So I work on bioprocesses. If you ask me questions about engineering scale up and how to build big reactors, I can tell you that, but not really on the Bhasma and those processes. I'm not really qualified to tell you that.
Another question from Dr. Mrs. Supriya. Is it possible to remove language barrier? How? Because all books, references and study material are generally available in English only.
There is a huge, again, thank you for that question, because it is a very, very important thing to keep in mind, because right now what happens is there are a lot of boards where you can actually go until 12th class and study in Hindi medium or Telugu medium or Marathi medium and Tamil medium. But then after that, undergraduate level, there are fewer options available, but still it is possible. But the moment you come to the master's level or PhD level, you have to go to English only. So that is a problem that we all recognize. And what is being done is a lot of the textbooks are being translated into the regional languages. So starting with 16 languages in the schedule of 16 languages of the Government of India schedule. And AICTE, at least I know that they are doing this they have already done that for the first year courses. They are in the process of doing this for the second year courses, where they are actually formulating the whole textbooks, reference materials and all those things. But then there is also a responsibility on us as teachers that we also try to translate as much as possible into our languages. So everyone in India, we know at least 2 languages, that is for sure. We'll know English, we'll know our mother tongue. And especially if you're teaching in a higher education institution, we can easily use that skill to translate whatever paper that we see or something like that, at least into our mother tongue, and create class notes and things like that. I teach a first year course here at IIT Indore, and I do a survey of first year students. As they come in, I ask them, how many of you are comfortable in English and how many of you are not comfortable in English? And you may be surprised to know that 15% of the incoming class of IIT Indore, at least, is not comfortable in English. What does that tell you?
Sir, why is
What is the status of students in our regular colleges? There are many, many people who are not comfortable in English. So it is not the lack of their intelligence that is stopping them. It is this language barrier that is stopping. So we need to make sure that we teach, if we can teach them and talk to them in their own mother tongue, you'll see the innovation in India take off like anything. Real India is there, and if we will be presented, if we innovative India will come out if we encourage mother tongue education.
Perfect, sir.
There are some efforts, but we need more.
So is there any other question from audience? And sir, you have given very good examples of food and nutrition and health, like we follow Chaturmas. And what is the use of Chaturmas? Because in the rainy season, we avoid leafy vegetables, then milk, and then curd, and then urad dal. So it is well scientific, though we do not follow, or our fathers or parents have not taught us, but the science is there. That's why it is already given in the scriptures, and we should follow. So sooner or later, we are going to follow that. Yes. And in Bhagavad Gita also, they have mentioned everything. What are the diet habits of in Sattva, Satgun, Rajogun, and
Sattvic, Tamasic, and Rajasic.
Everything is well described. Well described. Yes. Yes. So, sir, thank you very much. May I ask, this is a token of bouquet from our side, token of love. And may I request all the participants to just switch on your videos. And sir, this is a token of love as a certificate of recognition from our college.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All
of you, please switch on your videos.
Sir, it is a very good session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Really happy to be here.
Really
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste, sir.
Thank you. And I encourage all of you to come into that session at 2:30 today.